Welcome to the Mike and Doug Show. I'm Doug. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Doug. How are you?
Well, good. You're laughing because you just watched a video of Mark of the Zuckerbeast saying that he believes in God, which is truly a laughable matter. But today, because demon possession, exorcisms are in the news practically every single day, we are going to address that. And you have connected it to some of your research with those incredulous Babylonians and their many, many demon gods. Today, I can't wait to see what it is you're going to bring because you know I get all worked up when you start talking about these things.
I'm going to frame it for us. The Babylonian bankers of ancient times figured out how to do usury really well, and related to that slavery, any kind of abuse of humanity, they learned how to do really well. And once they learned how to use money to achieve their objectives, they essentially took over commerce throughout the world and have never let go of it. And so what we have been discovering as we've marched through these millennia in looking at how they did it, what they called themselves, and how consistent they were in this plying of usury, what we started putting together is the current story. And we are putting together a package of investigation material that will be published shortly. But we have discovered that the city of London is the center of this demon that's attacking our world. At one point in the mid-1800s, Benjamin Disraeli actually called London a new Babylon. And then he became prime minister for 2 terms after that. The British themselves couldn't keep this secret completely. And so what we're now doing is unpacking that. Since the very formation of the city of London, it has been under the control of these Babylonian bankers who marched west and began taking over the empires of Europe. And here we are today, suffering from 1,200 years of the work of the Babylonian Rabbinical merchant bankers of the world in taking control of our world. And so what we're suffering from now is the continuing effort of these Babylonians to control us, but now we're looking at how their religion actually wants to extinguish God. And in doing that, they want to extinguish God's creation. We are made in the image and likeness of God. And so it's now become life or death. It's not just about business. It's not just about money. It's not just about doing some bad things here or there. What we are fighting are demons who really want to wipe us out. And so what we have been looking at is more of the details of the nature of these demons that emerged out of Babylon. And it's amazing how many there were. I mean, we're making a list of just the demons that have been talked about within Scripture, and we're up to 60.
I'd call them merchants with a sword. Oh, that's a familiar phrase I use all the time to describe the British East India Company, but it really started in Babylon. And basically, they made sure that there was always a clash of nations, but the people who are the merchants, they don't pick up the sword. They use other people, and they use slaves, and they use mercenaries to carry out these wishes. Can you think of a big banker family who sent their children to war? No, they created the war on both sides. They funded it on both sides. It's like Prescott Bush and the Union Bank. He funded both sides. Hitler, he funded Britain, and he funded America, and he made a great profit, and in the end, they had to close down his bank. And then we get 2 of his descent inhabiting the White House. This is merchants with a sword, and these are killers. Now, you mentioned Babylon and all these demons. Let me explain a little bit about that. When the Hebrews were taken into the first and second captivity in Neo-Babylon, which was after the Assyrian captivity, so they usually say there's 2, but there's actually 3. That second and the third one, well, more than likely, they were already there. King Solomon's gold, we've demonstrated, had to have gone somewhere since it wasn't in the temple and it wasn't used for coins. Where did all that gold go? And you're talking tons and tons of gold. Well, it went to Babylon. And what was it used for? The assets to back up what are literally modern day banking rules and regulations and basically Ponzi schemes. They deprecated everything they touched. They turned it to evil. As a matter of fact, the Babylonians who worshiped these demons said, that the Hebrews or the Rabbinites in Babylon were the worst. They were the abomination of desolation. They went to the Ishtar temples, which were based upon understanding the mysteries of birth, and they turned them into whorehouses. And that's the reason the phrase, the whore of Babylon. That is referring to the Babylonian Rabbinites. Of course, the Hebrew was bred right out of them in the first captivity in Assyria. That's the reason that we call them the Rabbinite Babylonians, because they absorbed every culture that they came near. They infiltrated it, and the injunction given to Abraham to have one God, they never followed. And the reason you see so many demonic names in the Old Testament is because the Hebrews went back to worshiping all these demons, and they stopped going for the one God.
I think we have a very clear example of that in Solomon. At some point, Solomon stopped following God. And it was after he received all this gold from the mines of Ophir that were brought to him by the king of Tyre, who was a pagan. And in the process of Solomon using this gold, he married 700 women, and he took on 300 concubines. And the Bible says very clearly that Solomon forsook God, and he started building temples to all the religions of all of his wives. Those were all Babylonian gods and demons that he was building temples to. So the lure of the money and the no doubt deal that he did between Nineveh and Babylon and Jerusalem led not only him, but all of Israel astray. And so when we talk about the children of Israel, specifically the tribe of Judah, started doing in Babylon, we are looking at the forsaking of the Hebrew religion, the God of Israel, and the assumption of the demonic religions of Babylon. You're talking about Rodanites. That Rodan was an area of Babylon, which was the end of the Silk Road, where all these merchant bankers collected all their fees and taxes and income from the Silk Road.
Well, monotheism of Abraham, okay, what did that really do? It told a Chaldean, Abraham, to leave Chaldea, go to a land that wasn't his, and take it by force with a pogrom, with wiping out the people who were there. And this is why the Assyrians learned from the Hebrews early on that if you wanted to conquer your enemy, you had to breed them out of existence. And so when they were in the first captivity, the Assyrian kings had a rule. Any Hebrew could not marry another Hebrew. They had to marry some other race. And they basically annihilated 10 of the tribes. So when they were told the lie that there was a diaspora, there was no diaspora. The 10 tribes were taken to Assyria. They were bred out of existence. Even the Levites, they went down into southern Israel, and they took the Levites and they took them away so they could not do their practices. The way I look at this is very simple. Solomon and David, they claim to go back in their blood lineage to Abraham, but really what are they doing? They're not the ones doing the religious services, are they? Those are the Levites. And so even in their time, the Levites were an elite caste that you had to pay a tax to because they didn't work. They made everybody else go out and work, and then they charged taxes to every single person that was supposedly a Hebrew, a Jew, and they had to come to the temple once a year, and they had to pay in coinage. And then what did these later Pharisees and Sadducees do? They traded the coin of all the different Semitic groups that Moses had basically warred against, who believed in all kinds of different gods and demons. And they said, well, your coinage isn't good enough for the temple. You have to trade it for ours. And basically that was a tax upon a tax. Does that sound familiar? And then they became the bank. They were the ones who held the coins. But what did Solomon have? He had more gold than he knew what to do with. So where did the gold go? We believe it went to Babylon and was used as assets.
I don't think the Hebrews ever really controlled their banking. I think it was influenced and likely controlled from Babylon and Assyria way back to their beginnings, because you don't ever see a lot of discussion in the Bible about economic issues. But you do see a lot of writing in the Babylonian writings about how to handle contracts and loan money.
They rewrote the books of the Chaldeans and called it the books of Moses. And then they rewrote all of that when they started banking and taking over for the Sogdians and becoming merchants with the sword, and they named it the Talmud. But you have 3 different forms of the Talmud and multiple ways of expressing those teachings. What really happened was the rabbis, which there should have been no rabbis because the Levites were bred out of existence, and they were the elitists who literally collected the tax for the temple. But if the Levites were bred out of existence, then who was it that came to power? It would have been the rabbis, the banking families, the people who wrote the Talmud. And what did the Talmud say? It said usury is good. It said the Babylonian laws from ancient Babylon of Hammurabi created the fact that Hebrew fake Jews, Babylonian Rabbinites, created economic slavery by following the Hammurabi laws to put people in jail for owing a debt that was accumulated by usury. Well, what happened to them when they were in debtor's prison? They died. They worked them to death. And then if they hadn't paid off the debt, which they couldn't because they only made a tiny bit of money when you're in debtor's prison, then they took their children and they worked them as slaves. And then if they died, they took the wife and the female children. So the sins of the father were foisted upon the sons and daughters, all because of Babylonian Rabbinites becoming merchants with the sword that for money they're willing to kill.
They very carefully preserved their contracts in these clay tablets, aspects of the deal right on the cuneiform tablet. And then we'd actually have people sign these with their fingernails. In the mid-1800s, they discovered more of these contracts. These bankers were so clear about their dynasties back 600 years before Christ that they carefully preserved these contracts so that they could pass this ownership from father to son down the generations. And they were already practicing what we have today with compound interest.